as we just established. Fun fact before we start, actually, I did a talk once, just a 5-minute talk on time zones, and my head is still hurting just from figuring out all of the different time zones and the quirks. So for people that are not from Australia, or possibly from Australia as well, there's a time zone called see if I get this right, the Australian Western Central Standard Time. Pretty sure that's what it is. And it's plus GMT plus 8 hours and 45 minutes. Yep, and it's used by 2 towns in the whole country. So, yeah, time zones. Rah. But that's not why we're here. Welcome. We're here to talk about technology in humanity. And this is a talk, I've done it a few times now, and it keeps improving. I keep finding new things, and it's an interesting topic of at what point do we get to, are we human or are we machine? Like, where does technology kind of leads us in that regard? And it was so much I had to scratch that I actually ended up creating a talk about it. So here we are, Stormtrooper, because why not? So hello, everybody. There we go. I'm Lars. I'm a training architect. I work for a company called Cloud Guru. That's not important nor interesting, but if you want to follow me on Twitter, Lars Klint, and ask questions about the talk, feel free to, or questions about all sorts of other things. Maybe even llamas. Yeah, we won't get into llamas today, but yeah, I've created something called Llama Cam. Completely different talk. I should just give a little bit of a disclaimer here, because we are talking about humans. We are talking about the body. There will be a few images that are nothing gory or anything, but just a bit sort of, yeah, maybe a bit sort of confronting for some people. So if you don't like seeing the human body with technology attached to it, then maybe just, put me on mute or something. But that's just a disclaimer. And the other disclaimer I have is that I do live in country Victoria, in country Australia, and I am on a satellite connection. So this is the connection I have. This is as good as it gets. Some people say that it's better when my face is pixelated, but I don't know. So let's get into the more interesting stuff, shall we? So I want to start. This is Ray Flynn. Ray is 80 years old. He's a pensioner, right? And he is from the UK. He suffers from something called dry AMD. And dry AMD is an eye disease. It's quite deteriorating for your vision. It means that you lose sight eventually. And it's something that I thought we can all kind of relate to, because my granddad, when he was alive, he had 2 eye operations. He had, vision issues. It's something that's very common. I wear glasses because my eyes are football shaped. We have all sorts of issues with our sight at times, and especially later in life, it's quite common. So Ray has a problem that's very normal, very standard. When you're 80 years old, you may or may not have vision impairment. And we had this really cool thing that Ray could get. And this was back in 2015, 2016. Ray was the first human to have a bionic eye implant. And I know that it might not look, as maybe visionary or as futuristic as you might think. But so I'm just looking at that. By the way, if you want to ask questions, please ask them in the chat at any time, and I'll get to them. The chat is, sorry, not the WebEx chat, but the Slack chat in room 1, and we'll all sort of make it there. Looks like Google Glass, sort of. You're not completely wrong, actually. It's called the Argus 2, and it's a product that you can still buy. You can, at least if you're a medical professional, you can buy it. And so far, it's been treated with about 350 patients. This was a bit old stat because I couldn't find the new number, so it might be more by now. It's made by a US company called Second Sight, and it is, so the way it works, how it works, because it's a really interesting bit. So remember that picture? I'll just go back here. Remember the picture with Ray? So he's got this thing in his hand. He's got a thing on his glasses with a little transmitter on it. So just remember the look of that. And the way it works, so the actual implant looks like this. And it's a thing that goes around the eye. So the little black thing you can see there is, as it says, it's an antenna. It's the external the electronics case with the antenna attached to it, and it goes behind the eye. So that is what the glasses he had on, that's what that communicates to. right? So the antenna is for the glasses, and the glasses is what gets all the data that goes to the thing he held in his hand. Not quite as sophisticated as Google Glass in that sense, but Google Glass doesn't require surgery. So, you know, who knows? And then the way it works is that the implant picks up sensory input. It's not really vision as such. And that goes through the antenna into the glasses and down into, you know, the thing he was holding in his hand, the actual processor. And what he sees then as vision on the, you know, through the glasses is that he sees dot outlines. So that could be, for example, a doorway, as it says, you know, in the example there. And that doorway, this means that he can actually navigate a house. He can actually move around and see where rough outlines of things are. So bionic vision, yes. Not exactly 3D high def 4K things, right? It's not quite there yet, but it is a start. And that's where we are right now. That's the kind of things you can get for bionic vision as an example. So, yes, thank you, Damien. What are you trying to do? Highly recommend doing this. Put me on full screen. Are you sure about that? Anyway, that's why I made myself small here in the corner. Yeah, anyway. So how did we get here? So let me just rewind a little bit. I won't spend too much time on this, but I think it's important to know that wanting to enhance humans and the human body and our senses is not a new thing. In fact, it started like long time ago, like properly long time ago. So these guys, Egyptians, 950 BC, that's the first example, and it was a toe. Not quite the maybe exciting things, but they made a toe, and it was made out of wood, so no IoT things, obviously. And this must have been a vanity item. Someone lost their toe. Surely this didn't do much for stability, I don't think. Who knows? But that was the first thing. And then we didn't really do much. That was sort of the extent of what we could do was toes. And then let's fast forward like a couple of thousand years almost. So this is, his name is Götz van Berlichingen. And I apologize if there are Germans on the presentation call, because that's the best I can do. Now he was not a nice person. He's a knight, right? He's a German knight. So he's German, which means everything's done properly. The thing that he did properly was that he killed a lot of people because he was a mercenary. And then obviously he was a poet, because German mercenaries are poets, I guess. Yeah. Now, what he did do was that in one of these murderers things, like he wiped out villages and stuff. He actually was placed on an imperial ban by the Emperor of Germany because he was a very bad boy. So apparently that was all that happened if you were a knight. But he wiped out entire villages. He was murdery. But he did lose his hand. Came up, whoops, sorry, I went a bit fast. There we go. He came up with this thing, which is a mechanical hand. And because he's German, it worked. It was a proper mechanical hand. So it could hold a shield with it. It was to that extent of being a mechanical marvel. So he made that because he was German, I guess. Yeah, this guy. He lost his hand, made a new one. There we go. My slides are going a bit wonky. Let's go to pacemakers. Okay, we're fast forwarding another 400 years or so. And in 1889, there was a dude called John Alexander McWilliam who reported of his experiments. Whoops, God, I'm sorry. This is complete. There we go. This is supposed to go much slower. Come on, PowerPoint. Go. No, maybe not. Anyway, I'll just keep talking. In 1889, John Alexander McWilliam reported that he had found experiments where he could, put electrical impulses into a human heart, and it would make it pump. He could actually evoke pulses from the heart 60 to 70 times a minute. And then in 1926, Royal Alfred Hospital in Sydney, of all places, Mark C. Lidwell, my notes are right here because there's a lot of information in this talk, so I can't remember all of it. He devised a portable apparatus which plugged into a lighting point. Basically, he powered up a kind of a stabbing device, and he applied one pole to the skin, and then another was a needle, and it was insulated except at the point where it was plunged into the heart. Yeah, that was the first pacemaker. Stab the heart, point another thing to the skin, and electricity to it. And it kind of worked-ish. It wasn't until 1932 that another American physiologist came up with a hand cranking mechanism, and you could actually hand crank a motor to keep your heart rhythm steady. So how often you had to crank it, I'm not sure. And in 1958, we finally got the pacemaker. It was an absolute marvel. The first recipient of a pacemaker, at least one that survived, was a dude named Arne Larsson. And he was so in favor of this invention that he had 28 operations. 28 for replacing the pacemaker. And that's a long story about a pacemaker. But my point is that we have come to a point where a pacemaker is something so trivial that we don't even worry about it if you get a pacemaker. It's just like, oh, my heart's a bit irregular, I'll go get a pacemaker, and you know, it inserts it into your chest under the skin essentially, and your life quality just goes through the roof, right? It's just such a normal thing to do. That's what they look like today. Tiny, tiny little thing. And there just isn't much to it. Pacemakers is something that we have done over 1.5 million times since like the 80s. It's just not a dangerous thing anymore. So again, human persistence, we find a way because we can see that there is a need. There's a way that we can improve human life quality. So, okay. We have to talk about ethics, right? Because we're starting to change the human body. We're starting to use technology, and us as technologists kind of like doing that. You know, we'll get to that actually about implants and stuff, but I have friends that have implants. Like we like doing these sort of things as technologists, but there are, remember Ray from just before? What if we can give him Xray Vision? We're already going into his eye and giving him a bionic implant. What if we could be Xray Vision and we could actually create, well, X-ray man, right? Should we? Just because we can? Do we have the right? Does Ray want to be a 1960s superhero? You know, those are some of the questions I don't have the answers for, but they're questions that we need to ask. And coming back here to Australia, what if, so right now there's research. Right now there's research into getting people in wheelchairs, so people that have spinal damage, getting them into using the research to actually get them to walk again, to receive, to regain their physical abilities and the perception and everything. But what if, what is, so we're talking about the brain here, but I'm thinking, what is the social implications? Because is this something that's so, of course we would all like people to walk again, but what if it was something that only the rich could afford? What if it was a procedure that was so advanced and so expensive that, say the public couldn't do it, but just a few rich people could actually get this? We're starting to get into a territory that's sort of becoming class division, all the things that we really don't want, that we see in certain places around the world that are just nasty. And those are some of the implications of extending human capabilities with technology. Now, I just want to show you the scene, and you may have seen this before, but I've seen this movie, I don't know, 100 times maybe. I don't know, many, many times. See if I can get to play here. There we go. So this is from the movie The Fifth Element, which is, God, how old is it now? It's more than 20 years old. It's 97 or something like that. And in this particular scene, they found one DNA cell, just one cell of DNA, and from that they are reconstructing an entire human being. So they can, and in this, of course, it's a movie. The whole plot line is, but just because we can, does that mean we should? Should we start recreating, maybe not entire humans, but their hands again, or their legs, or their missing limbs or missing organs, or what if then we then start creating spare organs just because we can from the DNA? There's a lot of implications around this in terms of ethics, in terms of social acceptance. Yeah, favorite movie. It's good if you haven't seen it. Fifth Element, fantastic 90s movie. So let's have a look at some of the things that we are doing or we can do. Superior prosthetics. So currently today, we know that we can create legs or fiberglass or whatever they're made from, some sort of carbon composite, that makes people run faster than with human legs. Because we have runners that have lost either their whole leg or half the leg, and we are replacing their legs, and they run faster. They are superior in speed to runners that are all human. And what if we could do bionic reconstruction? So what if you could, say you lost your hand, just like the German knight before. He lost his hand, and we could then recreate a bionic hand, so completely computer controlled, etc. And then we could attach that. Seems like a good thing, doesn't it? What if that hand is suddenly way stronger, or way more, the dexterity is much better? Would people start chopping off their hands to get that bionic limb? Where do we stop? Where do we stop reconstruction? And then, of course, we will connect these things to the internet. Yeah, you can sit there and shake your head. We will connect these things to the internet. And can they then be hacked? The short answer, yes, and I have an example a bit later on, but we have to consider suddenly a whole sort of range of other issues around security and around connectivity for these things as well. So do you need a firmware update for your hand? Probably. Like, there's all these things that we don't know yet. And then, of course, we get to the point, which is what I said at the very beginning, when are we actually not human anymore? When does it stop being human? So those are all questions that I don't have the answers for. I don't think there are any answers just yet. Maybe there's never going to be. We're going to have some sort of framework of figuring this out, because this is getting more and more real. I've got some really cool examples in just a minute. So that's all great. I know you're sitting there going, yeah, that's a nice story. Yeah. But I'm a developer. I'm a technologist. What's actually happening right now? What am I doing? And we will get to the coding part of it in just a minute, because there's some interesting things going on there as well. But let me just start with this thing. So this is it's actually a blood laboratory, or blood lab in a single thing. So you see how small it is. He's holding it with tweezers in his little finger there. So the Swiss Federal Institute of Technology in Lausanne has come up with this blood lab. And you put this under your skin. So it's implantable blood lab, and has 5 sensors that monitors your blood all the time, so constantly. So it sends out data. Again, we're talking about a lot of data. It has recharges that goes through the skin, so you never have to take it out. Well, at some point you will have to. There's an end of life, I'm sure, but it recharges itself. Or through the skin at least. And you can use it for personalizing treatment, such as cancer treatment. And I think this is a fantastic invention, because what happens today with cancer patients is that you have many types of cancer, obviously, but for each type, there is a set number of treatments that you try. Now, I'm not a cancer doctor, or whatever that's called, my ignorance. But if you could tailor drugs that you need for you, rather than getting an estimate or some sort of generic plan set, I mean, it'll just change the whole thing. Just having that exact measurement in real time is super important. And we could go into nanotechnology about delivering the medicine and everything, but that's a different talk. So that's very cool. That's really cool. So if we go a bit bigger, also the Swiss has come up with this Cybathlon race. And this is amazing. So this is an entire sporting event that is made around with all the things that we have that we put on our body, what is the thing, how can we use it? What is the competition scenario that we can then use these in? And it's, there's 6 events in this, six. So the first one you see there is the brain-computer interface race, or the BCI race. So that's the guy sitting with a thing on his head, where people are quadriplegic, so they have no movement of their arms or legs, and they use this brain-computer interface to control an avatar in a computer game. So if you've seen the movie Avatar, very similar. They use the actual brain function to control a person. It's a computer game person. And the aim is that where the technology is going with this is that you could then possibly control a wheelchair or external arms or whatever it might be for using just your brain. but that's a sporting event, right? Then we have the functional electrical stimulation, FES, bike race. So this is the second picture, people on the bikes there. So that's paraplegic, so that people have no movement of their legs, but their arms. And they're using electrical stimulation to pedal on these kind of bicycles. And yeah, we could see many uses for that as well. Obviously, our legs move just based on electrical impulses. Apple Watch 7. What does that mean, Michelle? What do you mean by Apple Watch 7? It's probably in relation to something I was saying, and now I forgot.
Yeah, because you were saying like the blood, the tiny blood lab thing can monitor your 5 senses and stuff. So I was like, yeah, that'll be the next Apple Watch.
Yeah, and then Apple has that data too. I'm going to leave that one there. Then the third picture, which is powered arm prosthesis race. So essentially, whether they've lost an arm or part of an arm, and they're navigating this tiny little course around obstacles just with the prosthetic that they have on. So they have to maneuver the whole arm. Then we have the powered leg prosthesis race, which is obviously you have a similar thing. You have a leg and you got to jump over obstacles and navigate a course. And then we have, we go. Yeah, excellent. And then we have the powered leg. No, that was that one. Then we have the exoskeleton. That's my favorite. The fifth picture is the exoskeleton race. So people that have no control of their legs can actually do running and stuff. It's an exoskeleton. I don't know what else to say. It just seems amazing. I've seen examples of this where people walk upstairs. And I would just love to see the software for these things. I would just love to see all the logic that goes into keeping balance and everything. It's just unbelievable. And finally, the powered wheelchair race, which is, as it says, a powered wheelchair. You're going to navigate a whole ton of obstacles. And again, it's for pilots with severe walking disabilities. Again, the technology is to get people out and about, to not just be in a wheelchair that only goes down the mall, but actually you can go on a hike, or you can go, be a landscape artist, whatever you want to do, right? And that's why I think this is important. Yes, it's a kind of fun way of going into bionics, but it's also, each of these events has a real life research component to it. And that's why they do this kind of event, right? So now I'm not sure, because of WebEx, whether the audio is going to work on the next video. Let me know if you can hear it. Any audio? Is there? I'm just looking, people saying no. Okay, I think so. It worked in, hopefully you can get an idea. This guy has 2 arms. His name is Lars Bohr. He's got 2 prosthetic arms. He lost both arms about 40 years ago, so not recently. And in very short time, a matter of days, he was able to control both arms using his brain, or his normal function, as in thinking of using his arms. So the limbs were simply connected to the existing nerve ends through many magic things, I'm sure. It's probably not that simple. But for Les, it was relatively simple. It was not, and if you watch the video, I can put a link in this chat afterwards. It's just saying it's transformed his life. He now has 2 arms like he had 40 years ago, and he can do not everything, because, we're still not there yet, but most things. You can open a door, hey, things like that. So super, super important that we're doing all of these things in terms of just getting people that have lost part of what make them human. So that could be, in this case, it's all physical disabilities, so losing a leg or arms or, digits or whatever it might be. But it makes them, their quality of life is just suddenly so much greater. But again, we got to come back to the ethics, and do we then just, if these arms are better, do we then cut our own arms off, etc., etc.? Like, that's a different story. Okay, so here's the fun bit. So I'm assuming some people here are developers. Yeah, I can see a few. I can see David. I know David's a developer. Damo's never been a developer. So he's shaking his head. Melissa's very much a developer. I know that, because I don't understand anything she says. But yeah, I'm sure there's other people on the call as well. There are developers. And what are the things that we can get involved with? Like, how do we actually get into this? Because it is software development. There is a large component of this that is software. It's not all just about hardware and the actual things, right? So there's something called Open Bionic Systems. This is an open source initiative, and as such, it kind of goes up and down in activity, but it is there. And it's the idea is to develop affordable, lightweight, modular, adaptive robotic and bionic devices. So that's from their website. So they want to make sure that all of the software that they produce will work with a variety of different kinds of implementations. And it's written in Python and MATLAB. But anyway, so, and we know they're real because they have a GitHub repository. That makes them a real development thing. See, people are nodding. Yes, Dave, they are. Stop it. And they also have humor, which I appreciate a lot. I like this. The company history, or the history of Bionics, is I like that one. They waited 4 years for Windows Update. We've all been there. Yep. So they are a real thing. And one of the things that they've used their, library for is this thing. And again, there's no audio, but it's not too important. See the leg here that the lady is walking with, and she's walking, learning how to walk with a new leg. Making a leg or a foot prosthetic is incredibly complex, because if you think of how many things you do, just me here, just bobbing back and forwards, I'm constantly moving my weight back and forwards, and my feet, my toes, my heels, my ankles, everything is compensating to keep me upright. And I don't even think about it. Like, as humans, we sort of just go, yeah, or whatever. If suddenly, you walk on something and there's a slight kink in something, and suddenly you move to the left, your whole body just compensates for it. Everything is just in tune to keep you upright, most of the time anyway. And this is frustratingly tricky. If you try and do this, but in code, try and keep all of these things, and you try and build, this thing, it's very, very tricky. And this is what the Open Bionics is kind of trying to get around. So, if I flick my angle, it's a lot more complicated than what it looks like. So this is the best bit. This is Raspberry Pi powered AI-based controls, right? And it has a bunch of sensors on it, and it sends all this in, and it keeps learning about how you walk to kind of adjust. So that's why the lady is on the treadmill, she's learning to walk with the leg, and the leg is learning to walk with her, which is kind of, I'm sure this is the future of most things. It's got to be AI, cloud, etc., but we'll get to that. So here is how do you find it? opensourceleg.com, and that's what it is. And here there's all sorts. There's all the different bits you need, all the parts, all the requirements for everything. It's quite impressive. They've just laid it all out. So if you want to build your own, you can 3D print a bunch of stuff. You can buy stuff off the shelf. A whole lot of stuff. It's on the website. Sorry, I finally read Damo's comment. Not a good one. So do you do development, Damo? Yeah, okay. So let's talk about this guy, because I like these real world examples. It makes it all much more real. Yes, we can go and we can fiddle with it, we look at some sample code, etc., but it's not as interesting as seeing what people do with it. And there's a guy called Cliff Agius. He's actually a pilot from the UK. And in his spare time, he's a software developer. Pretty impressive. So he's created this project called Handy, and it's all built, again, open source. He had a friend, or a friend's son, I think it was, that lost a hand. He was trying to help him out, trying to figure out how this could work. And he'd written a fantastic blog post on it. And it's not just, he's 3D printing a hand. So this is his at home, and there's all different types of prototypes. He's trying to figure out which plastic to use, because if you use hard plastic, it doesn't grip, everything just slides out of the hand. And he's put prices on everything. And then he's put it all together with, he's used Xamarin to use an Android app that controls it as well. So you can control the hand with an app in this case. And he's, what was the other thing? He's got to a point now where you can print it out yourself. He's got all the schematics on his blog. You can print out your own hand. You can make it work just with a bunch of, you can see, how much is it? It's like 6 pounds or something without the moles. Like it's almost nothing that the cost of this. So this is the power of it, the power of open source, the power of tinkering. And I love tinkering. And then, of course, it also has to do with cloud computing. We have to talk about cloud computing because a lot of this machine learning, it's what essentially is artificial intelligence. We're going to have to use the cloud because you don't want, millions or thousands or whatever it might be on these devices or these machines to run all this analysis when you can just use the cloud. And in this case, you can see there's a guy researching in the background. He is teaching this robot hand to pour. So it's already gripped the bottle. That apparently has already been done, but he's teaching you how to pour. And that's, if you've done any type of machine learning, that is the model that it is learning from. So it's very impressive. And yeah, I think cloud computing is definitely going to be part of this whole scenario in the world, because we're going to connect everything. Don't forget. So hopefully that shows all right. And speaking of Azure, the nice people at Microsoft has been kind enough to provide all these links. Because yes, I'm an Azure MVP for Microsoft, which means that they like me showing links and stuff. Now there is Azure Swag as well, which is at the bottom there, Azure Developer Swag, and there is some. I think they said first 4. So I don't know how to distribute this, but go to that link. There's a form you got to fill out. You can sign up for a newsletter, which I would actually recommend, that the community newsletter. It's actually really good. Not just because I'm MVP, but there's some really good stuff in there, really interesting stuff that people are doing with code and nerdy stuff, and you can always just unsubscribe. But go to that, AKMS, Azure Developer Swag, put in the speaker code Lars21, very inventive, and then you can get a thing. I actually don't know what they're going to do entirely, but I know David forgot to do it, so I just called him out. He's looking at me going, "Damn you!" Now, if you want to be, if you want to try Azure as well, I love Azure. It's the platform I use every day. So there you go. All right. Cool. So I did talk about hacking earlier. This is a real thing. This is a real article about some implanted medical devices that got hacked. And these were, in fact, heart defibrillators. Not a good thing to get hacked. Well, anything medical inside your body is probably not a good thing to get hacked. So yes, it does happen. I don't think anything actually, there was no result of this as, malice or anything. It's just people found vulnerabilities. But once we start connecting everything to the internet, this is what happens. Such as, let's have an example here. So in Sydney, we have the Opal Card. This is just your public transport card. You use it to tap on, tap off, or whatever it is that you do. It's like an Oyster card in the UK. It's like a Mikey card in Melbourne, which mostly works. But you can also now, in certain areas, what about if you could just have it implanted in your hand, as just a little chip in your hand. So you didn't have to carry a card, you didn't have to remember the card, you just sort of go, just walk through things, and everything is on that little implanted chip in your hand. And I do know people that have these chips implanted, and I'm not sure why, but I'm sure they do a thing. But yeah, you can do it now, get your implants in your hand or other places. Yeah. So what if you shake hand with someone? Hello, hello, hello. What if they have a reader in their hand and they steal, well, if you stole your Opal card, probably not a big deal, but what if you had your bank details on it or your medical data or whatever it might be? What if that was suddenly something just with oh wait, we can't shake hands anymore. So you're going to have to put it on your elbow and then do never mind. You get the point. And then we all know what happens once that transfer is done. Yep, it ends up, it's every time. So yeah, if you want your data to be in Troy's computer, use implant Bionics. No, that's probably not how it works, but there's definitely security risks in all of this. There's definitely something where at one point we got to go, should I really put that in there, or should I really connect it to the internet? Says the guy who's everything on the farm to the internet. But anyway, yeah, we can't help ourselves, right? So it's good and bad. We've got to figure out what the ramifications are. So if you are a developer, there are many ways that you can get involved with the whole Bionics open source world. There are many, many other companies, and obviously pharmaceuticals are way into this, but they're not really in the mood for open source. I certainly haven't come across any just yet, but there are many ways that you can get involved. So even if you're not a Python developer. So what does the future look like? Like, what are we actually getting? Sweaty hands, sorry. What are we going? Where are we going with this? What is actually happening here? So, one thing that and one of many things, but this is something I didn't see coming: ingestible origami robots. So it's called origami because it folds itself out. But it's a capsule made of meat, yeah, and then you ingest it, and then the objects inside of this capsule that is in the origami kind of goes in and patch up wounds, or they deliver medicine, or and these are real things. This is something that, you know, as early as 2016, so 4 years ago, there were trials with this and figuring out how it works. But this is, right, if you're a vegetarian, I'm sure there's a not chicken option as well. But this is a really clever way of delivering, again, very, very targeted medical treatment. And I would imagine this would be coming along at some point. Nanotechnology in particular. I've done quite a bit of research on nanotechnology, and it's hard to get right, but it works as in it's very fault proof. The fault tolerance is very, very high when you actually get it to work. So I think this is part of the future. Come on, there we go. Bit of a controversial point, but what about gender transformation? This is an interesting kind of, not idea, but you used robotics and bionics for gender transformation, in the sense that right now we use surgery and we recreate, you know, sexual organs from you know, skin and other materials. But what if we could just have a bionic penis? And you may laugh, but it's a thing. It's an actual thing, and I think it's a really important step in terms of helping people through, you know, these processes. I definitely don't think we should discount it. But that's, again, another thing that I certainly hadn't seen coming. But yeah, why not? If it works better that way. And I can see people just stunned in silence. There's no questions at all. Feel free, again, in the Slack room one, if you want to ask anything. Yeah, please do. So, flexible transistors. So, transistors in general are very rigid, and they don't bend well, which means they can't get, like, we have a problem now with CPUs and the transistors on CPUs that we can't actually make them any smaller. They're currently, I think, the smallest one is 9 nanometers or 7 or something, but it starts getting to a point where even the atoms that are, you know, in this are starting to leak electricity, and there's it just becomes a mess, and then you have nothing working. Now, instead, using flexible transistors in all sorts of things. You can even use them in implanted medical devices, or that means that you can you can use much smaller things. Again, we're talking about size again, much, much smaller, because the transistors, and this is I must admit, this is an area I found quite intimidating / confusing, because they were kind of going against everything I knew about electrical engineering, at least. So anyway, and what if we could record neural activity? What if we start recording how your brain works, and then we give we put that through AI and machine learning, and we tell your brain how to do it better? I think there's going to be some point where we have these sort of cognitive enhancements coming along, and I don't know if it's a good thing. But we're already using computers and AI to, you know, do things that we could never do ourselves. And do we start actually becoming that sort of thing? Yeah, it's a really tricky kind of question. Now, I was going to then say that if you had questions, but there hasn't been any questions, which is interesting. This is the first time I did this talk with no questions. So is there anything you want to ask? Now you got your chance, because if not now, then when? And this is over to you, both in terms of questions, but also in terms of getting into this field. I'm considering buying a 3D printer because I don't, but there's a lot of this stuff that I think could be, at least we can print things that at least aids in a lot of these things. I have a friend at work who has been printing straps for face shield because of COVID. You know, that's nothing to do with bionics, but there are many ways that we can help, and this is one of them. So, oh, Damien Brady is typing. Come on, Damo, type the thing. You can also just go on mute. You are allowed to talk if you want. If that's easier. Thoughts on using implant devices as biometrics. So do you mean actually measuring the body and figuring out like your home assistant for your body? Is that what you're thinking? Biometrics?
More like, yeah, we can talk. More like at the moment, the 2FA stuff, like you have your username, your password, and then you have the thing that you have like a fingerprint or that's often defaulted to kind of a mobile phone with a,
gotcha,
security code or something like that. The thing that you have can be the thing that's inside your hand, potentially.
And I think it's already it's gonna come very soon. I would imagine some places already have it, as a trial in any case. For example, that magnetic card you have that you swipe in to go to your office. Not that any of us go to an office right now, but that could certainly be in your hand. Why not? It's just a very, very simple thing. But I think, I definitely think, and we've seen this in many movies, spy movies in particular, where they put their arm under some UV light and there's a number that shows up, etc., etc. We could absolutely have something like that. I'm thinking in terms of we could also go down the route of DNA computing, and we could actually ourselves become like a computing device to some extent. DNA computing is a very murky field still. It's quite interesting. So far you can for $1 million get 1 megabyte of storage, so it's not quite there yet, right? But I think DNA, not just biometrics, but DNA as well, is something that will be utilized a lot more because we don't really understand it yet. And maybe, we already use retina and things like that, but maybe your blood composition could be your 2FA. That would be kind of cool. I don't know. Oh, no, you were sick. No, I just want to log in. Yeah, so. Dave, you were writing. Anyone else? And feel free to go on mute. That's fine.
Lars, while you were looking up this kind of stuff and researching it, what was the most, unexpected enhancement that you came across? Not necessarily enhancement, but prosthetic or machine attached to person kind of thing.
That's a good question. I must say the gender transformation stuff, I just didn't expect. It was both sort of like, wow, really? And yeah, why not? Kind of experience. Like and I just had to include it. It's there's so much talk right now of inclusion and diversity and everything, and I think this is just part of it. Like you got to have, cover all bases in that sense. And why not? I don't know if that quite answers the questions, but that was just what came to mind immediately. Now, Daniel's saying, what do you mean by DNA computing? So DNA computing is the idea of using manufactured DNA, not human DNA, but manufactured DNA to use computations, because DNA by design has 4 bits. It has 4 proteins in it. Is it proteins? I think it is. And I can't remember, the TABN or something like that. And using that sequence to actually perform calculations. It's sort of in the vein of quantum computing, is that it's very theoretical still, but I think it has much more real potential of being a thing we'd use instead of quantum computing. Quantum computing is very, very difficult. So that's the idea in essence of using DNA computing. Dave was just going to say, I too am thinking of buying a 3D printer, so let me know which one I should get. I don't know. I just made a whole episode of my show on 3D printing. You'd be amazed that someone has printed a boat. Yep. University in America has printed a whole boat, 25 feet of it. People have printed a house, an entire house in 24 hours, printed with concrete. So yeah, I'm not sure how big you want to go, Dave. So Yas wants that one as well. I don't know what Gattaca means, Liam. Gotta go, maybe? Anyway, would you probably choose to plug into Elon's Neuralink if when... Sorry?
The proteins in the DNA. GATC.
Gattaca.
There was a movie about it.
Gotcha. All right, cool, thank you. I was... Well, not quite. I had DNA, right? Yeah, I will look that up. Thank you very much. Would I personally choose to plug into Elon's Neuralink if when released? I'm not sure exactly what that's going to do, I must admit. So if anyone wants to kind of explain what Elon's Neuralink is. Also, someone made a 3D printer that can print 3D printers. Yeah, I didn't go into the whole robot uprising about when robots start making robots, but there are robots that can make robots that do exist. And Damo got a brilliant moment there. Gotta go. I didn't know that either. But if there's anything else, no? That's a little bit short, but that means you get 14 minutes back of your afternoon, if you're in Australia or wherever you are. So I hope that was useful. It's just a bunch of things that I found out that I found very interesting and I'd share, because as technologists, this is definitely a path that we will see becoming more and more real. And even if it's a Neuralink, would you cut off your arms if you could have cooler, better arms? Well, yeah, maybe. Yeah. So anyway, thanks everybody. That was all I had. Feel free to. I'll be on the chat this afternoon if you have questions or whatever, or put me on Twitter. Feel free to do that. Thank you.